Hi, I'm Barry Coatesworth. I work in Guidehouse, which is a consultancy. I'm a director of cybersecurity, risk and compliance. I've had about 30 years experience in cybersecurity or information security. And one of the things I've helped do is design the Cyber Essentials scheme as part of the industry advisory group for the UK government. So I think, as I said, I've been doing cybersecurity for 30 years. So when I started my career off, there was no degrees or very little qualifications in cybersecurity. I got a lot of skills in security from the military, and I was really good at a younger age at computers. So when I left, I put security and computers together. And back in the day, it was called computer security. And since then, I've gradually moved up from a more technical role to a more strategic role, and now to be a chief information security officer or director. So it's been progressively interesting. But I think a long time ago, like I said, it was mainly law enforcement, police or academics that went into cybersecurity. Okay, so my job role has evolved over the last few years. It has predominantly been a technical background, but now it's more of a business function. And what we've seen over the last 2 years is the business is taking cybersecurity more seriously and being part of the business instead of part of the IT crowd. My day-to-day activities vary. Sometimes it's protecting critical national infrastructure within the UK. Sometimes it's reviewing legislation. Usually I tend to work with either senior information officers, chief information security officers, or the CEOs. But one day is never the same. There is the usual mundane admin things that we do, but it's quite varied, which is good. So my main activities my job entails is usually really around risk assessments, audits to a degree, security audits, and really just giving advisory services to senior stakeholders, either within large enterprises or small enterprises, on what they need to do for security. So my day-to-day activities that my job entails is usually around advising senior individuals in organisations, around risk assessments, cybersecurity posture, how to improve security, as well as maybe doing some assessments for them. The stakeholders I work with are usually, chief financial officers, CIOs, CEOs, but also IT directors and sometimes security engineers or engineers. Okay, it is somewhat important for the IT team to have a specialist in. Now, it does depend on the organisation. Sometimes IT security is within the IT department, and sometimes it's in the information security department, so it does vary. So the IT skills are normally technical, so we talk about firewalls or antivirus. They're sometimes within the IT department. So it is fairly important, but not always. It depends on the structure of the organisation. So it's really important that security specialists help inform company policies and procedures. Without this specialist knowledge, they might make some mistakes in compliance or legal regulations, so GDPR or just legal laws for cybersecurity. So it's very important that they have a specialist to help them along the line. For GDPR, it's really important because if you've not done due diligence, then the fines can be astronomical for a business and really damage its reputation as well at the same time. So businesses are quite effective in managing risks. What they're less effective in is identifying risks and understanding these risks. Mature organisations will have more robust risk methodology compared to fairly younger ones and startup ones. But it needs someone there to review the risks and understand the risks, and also, more importantly, articulate the risks. So I would say to businesses, when they look at the digital strategy, is don't add security towards the end as a bolt-on, include it as part of it. What we find is that digital strategy, sometimes security is as an afterthought, then proactive, and at the end of it, this is going to increase costs. It's going to reduce the strategy and weaken the strategy and delay and cause extension on timeline. So always think of security at the beginning, especially on legal and compliance requirements. So there's some really good examples of where security is missed out of digital strategy. One of the most prevalent ones, as I said, is to do with contracts. And what we find is that as it's not part of the beginning, it's very hard to enforce security during the strategy if it's not contractually agreed halfway through. So we find we get to the end of the strategy and find there's lots of things missing from a supplier or even internally that's needed for the strategy to succeed. So a good example is where a company didn't actually have good contracts right at the beginning of its digital strategy. And what happened in the end, it cost them a couple of million then to actually bolt on security towards the end. And as we know, security that's bolted on at the end of any project or strategy, the cost increased significantly by 50% or 100%. So think secure at the beginning, and then your strategy will be secure towards the end. So one way to mitigate some of these risks is to really have a good governance structure around your strategy, making sure the right people are informed at the right time about the risks, and make sure that security is a really good element in there in the governance one. You find quite often that we'll talk about project governance and strategic governance, but security is not really in that one, or cybersecurity isn't. So making sure the good governance structure for strategy is in there will mitigate a lot of these risks and make sure the right people understand the issues and at the right time. Yeah, okay. So I suppose from any strategy, whoever's in charge of delivering it has to communicate to the relevant people, whether it's the IT director, whether it's the board or the CFO, on these requirements and where they are. And part of that strategy should be governance, and good governance should include cybersecurity. So when it comes to the supply chain, one of the biggest issues that business need to understand, the risks, is actually understanding how resilient you are in your supply chain, and also understand the third-party risks that your suppliers have. Now, part of this we see is that most large organisations or small organisations are dependent on a few key suppliers. And if they have an incident, an issue, it could ultimately affect overall how you deliver services to your clients. So understanding who your suppliers are, how resilient you are on them, and understand also what level of risk they have overall to your overall business operations. So how can a business strengthen its credentials? Well, quite easily. In the UK, we've got the Cyber Essentials scheme, which is generally used for supply chain security. One of them is making sure it's got a basic level of cyber hygiene. The other things they can do is do third-party risk assessments on them, depending on the risk level they are, and the supplier one is that one. But ideally, is a basic level of cybersecurity, and the credentials should be the Cyber Essentials scheme in that regard. It's been around for a good 8 years now, and it's got lots of benefits for any suppliers, and the government also use it for its supply chain. So if you do have a breach, how do you remediate this against your partners? Well, the first thing you've got to think about is your partner is having a security breach, so you're not going to get good communications first of all. The best thing to do is agree beforehand in how you communicate every 24 hours, every 4 hours, every 2 hours. Usually you will find for SMEs, you'll probably get an initial statement while they investigate, and then 24 hours later, and then 48 hours later, they'll give more details around this incident. But ideally, it's good communications plan with them, and it's a fully agreed level. But don't expect anything every 2 hours or 4 hours. Usually you get something with every 24 hours. So good communications lines is ideal. And also make sure you have a good rapport with them. But be very wary that they're dealing with an incident, and therefore they might not be able to give you as much time as you would like. So your approach to cybersecurity has to be pragmatic. You cannot protect everything. So look at where your assets are, look at what's valuable to your organisation, data, infrastructure, and look at the threats and vulnerabilities around those key assets. The first thing you need to do is do an asset inventory and find out where things are, and then look at building some risks around that one. But be pragmatic. You cannot fix everything, and you cannot save everything in your environment. When reviewing and improving your cybersecurity posture, there's a number of things that you need to do, the number of stages, and we normally refer to this as a security improvement plan. So firstly, as part of the plan, what you need to do is understand the risk to your business and how it aligns with your business objectives. Secondly, identify vulnerabilities and weaknesses within your infrastructure. So third is to understand your business risks and what's important to the business as part of the plan. Fourth, you need to then start looking at enhancing your security controls, your reactive or proactive controls around that one as part of the plan. What do you need to improve on? So thirdly, as part of the plan, you need to understand what business risks you are and what they equate to as part of overall strategy. Fourth, as part of the plan, you need to look at what security controls you have in place, how you can improve them, which ones need to be reinforced quicker, and which ones can you put back a little bit. You must plan for contingencies. Every security improvement plan will change over its period of time, so you need to plan for contingencies and changes to it. And lastly, the sixth one is you need to keep revising your plan every quarter, every year. If it's a 3-year plan, just make sure it's scheduled in. I would also, though, recommend looking at the National Cybersecurity Centre's website. They've got some really good documentation on cybersecurity for small, medium and enterprises. So I would definitely recommend looking at that one there, because I've got a lot of good things you need to do to improve your cybersecurity posture. So some of the most easiest and simple practices that a business can put in place is really what I call looking at the 3 Ps. Now the 3 Ps are passwords, patching and people. Now usually an incident revolves around one or many of these. So if you look at your passwords, strengthening them, changing them regularly. If you look at patching your systems where you can, keep them up to date as much as possible. And then you've got the personal side. So this is trying to do with security awareness for them, letting them understand what phishing looks like and ransomware looks like. If you overall look at the 3 Ps, or those 3 things, more than likely you will get really good improvements on your infrastructure and your services. So by putting these good practices in place, you will significantly reduce the ability of an incident happening. So the other interesting ones is when people leave, to making sure that we've revoked their access, reviews their key fobs to physical access to the building, and make sure they have access to data. That also includes, because we're quite remote at the moment, removing the remote access to systems as well. So with the working from home model now, you've also got an increased risk with maybe other people using your work and company laptop. You've got also maybe you're not looking at the screen as often as possible. Now in a home environment that can be quite hard. So ideally the best one is to have a dedicated workspace that you can control, like a home office or somewhere else, away from maybe other members of your family, or maybe just other ways where it's nice and quiet to look at your current workload. So I would recommend having a private space. So the security landscape today has not significantly changed, probably since the 1970s. What has changed really is technology, regulatory requirements and some threats. The biggest change was probably the internet in that regard, but currently the biggest change is remote working. So the landscape is going to change now probably to more hybrid working, more remote working. And then again as we discussed, you've got people overlooking you at the workplace at home, you've got printing things off, maybe you need to do some shredding. So the landscape is changing to more remote working, and with that one, you've just kind of extended your overall security. So the cybersecurity landscape hasn't significantly changed over the last few years. The internet was a big change. Since COVID, remote working has also changed the landscape. There's more remote working. How will things change in the future? Well, hybrid working is going to be here for a lot longer, so we need to protect our remote workers a bit more. Can we give them a bit more of a secure space? Can we make them more productive without squeezing things down with them and stopping them doing their job? What else is going to change as well? Some more laws will come out. So more regulations are bound to happen for cybersecurity, and also we're going to see some more legislation as well. So in Europe, there's already legislation on the use of artificial intelligence and surveillance. We're going to see more of that in the UK. Okay, so one of the most important things business should do now is look after their remote workers. So from attackers and adversaries are doing is attacking people at home and your remote workers. So you need to look after them. You need to make sure that they're secure. You need to make sure that they've got enough protection around them so they can do their job safely and securely. But this is only going to increase over the next few years as more hybrid working happens. And this is really important that businesses need to think about doing right now. The 1, 10 and 60-minute rule is more of a challenge than aspirational. What this means is you've got 1 minute to detect an attack, 10 minutes to respond, and 60 minutes to get your attacker off the network. In practice, this takes a lot longer. So in average in 2021, it was 51 days to get an attacker before you can identify an attacker on your network. Then it usually will take you an extra 14 to 21 days to get the attacker off your network anyway. So they've been here a long while. So the 1, 10 and 61 is very aspirational. You should really look at more pragmatic ways of getting an attacker off your network. So looking at your controls, if someone's on your network, you've got proactive and reactive controls. Both are equally important. So the reactive ones are detection, you've detected one. The proactive ones are more technical ones like firewalls and other technical controls to stop this from happening. You can't really have reactive and proactive separately. You're both are part of the same ecosystem. Both are joined together. You must have reactive controls and proactive controls, and ideally, as I said, both are not more important than one or the other. So I've got a saying that security should be from the classroom to the boardroom. It is no longer a business issue, it is a social issue. So just make sure that your family, your friends, your spouses have a security mindset and have security in mind when they're doing things on the internet or on their mobile phone, and be very wary that attackers will look for the low-hanging fruit. And it might not be you they're targeting, it could well be your family. So hacking and cybercrime used to be very technical in nature. Nowadays, you can go to the dark web and you can have crime as a service where you can pay somebody $100 or $500, even less than that, to either attack you, gather information, or take down your services, including ransomware.